Well, all right, let's begin. Today is October 27th, year of our Lord 2025, Monday. And today we're going to read an article straight out of Gig Eva. Let's begin. All right. Gig Eva, you know them, you fear them, you're troubled by them. And today, Gig Eva's article is by Tyler Cox, posted on Center for Baptist Leadership. And we're going to read this article, and I'm going to comment on it as I see fit. From what I understand, I'm ghost scare quoted. Scare quote, you know what a scare quote is, but a ghost quote is a quote that's not attributed. So, he's talking about me, but not naming me, but it's about me. And so it's a ghost scare quote. And we're going to talk about that and how I feel about that. But before we begin, we got to talk about the Jets, baby. The Jets, they got their first win of the year yesterday, and it was a gutsy win. I have to say, Justin Fields, if you're not familiar with the Jets clown show, let me just kind of fill you in, right? Well, the Jets haven't won all year. They've been horrendous, and their quarterback, Justin Fields, has been awful. Well, out of nowhere, the owner of the Jets, Woody Johnson, just rips the quarterback out of nowhere, just for no reason. He just says, he believes in the coach, and it's not the coach's fault, it's just the quarterback's fault because he can't even complete a pass, and he's got a low passer rating, and he stinks, basically, is what he said. And, he said this, in my opinion, to try to force the head coach's hand to replace him with the backup quarterback, which is a very stupid thing to do if you're the owner. You don't want to ever give the impression that your coach has no choice in who he plays and how he does things and stuff like that. Even if that's the truth, and of course, he answers to the owner, he's got to do what the owner says. You don't want other people knowing that that's how the situation is. And so all week, the coach, Aaron Glenn, has had to try to somehow figure out how to get us to believe that, he's still in charge. The owner, he has his opinions, but he leaves that up to me and stuff like that. Obviously, everybody knows that that's not the case, right? Obviously, if the owner wants something, the owner's going to get it. Well, he... all week, it's just a clown show. The head coach was like, I'm not going to tell you who the starting quarterback is. I'm going to keep it a secret, because we need to keep our competitive advantage. And I know who it's going to be, but it's going to be a secret. Well, turns out that the backup quarterback allegedly has an injury. So the quarterback who the owner ripped all week is starting. And you got to feel for the guy. Imagine if the owner of your team just talks about how awful you are. Now you got to play. Now you got to play for this team. And so he's starting, and he had a great game. And they won the game, and, it's just, you can't write these scripts any better. And so now he's the quarterback again, and he knows that the owner thinks he stinks. And I gotta say, I feel bad for the guy, Justin Fields. He's a Christian brother. I've been ripping him with my brother all year. Now I feel bad. Now I want him to do well. You know what I mean? So hey, hats off to Justin Fields, brother in the Lord. Had a great game, and he was just begging the Lord just for one win. Just please, one win. Let me figure this out for one game. And he did. So there you go. But in any case, so here we go. Let's read this article. This is an article about the new Jared Wilson book. Jared C. Wilson, my good buddy. Jared C. Wilson. We used to be friends. He's even watched my kid when we visited him in Kansas City many years ago, and he said, hey, me and my wife will watch your kid, and you guys can go out on a date. And we did, and it was a great day. That was the same year the Mets were playing the Kansas City Royals in the World Series, and we got our butts kicked. But in any case, so me and Jared used to be friends, but we stopped being friends because he didn't like how I was criticizing Russell Moore and Matt Chandler and all that kind of stuff, and that was enough for him. He couldn't be my friend anymore, all this kind of thing. But this is an article called The article's called Drifting Still, a review of Jared Wilson's, quote, Lest We Drift. That's the name of his new book, I guess. So here we go. He says, much of Jared Wilson's Lest We Drift, 5 departure dangers from the one true gospel reads as a chronicle of the gospel-centered movement's rise and decline. Interestingly, it was written by one of its most vocal proponents who is now numbered among its survivors. Notably, the book is neither triumphal nor cynical. Wilson is confident about the implosion of his generation's evangelical renewal, yet his analysis remains enclosed within the same framework that produced the collapse. He sees the drift, but cannot honestly define its root cause, which leads me to ask, quote, is this just reinventing the wheel? Wilson's reflections and analysis are both personal and theological. The danger, he insists, lies in, quote, taking our eyes off the center, end quote. He quotes Hebrews 2:1. We must pay closer attention to that which we have heard, lest we drift away from it. And concludes that the failure is the result of distraction. The failure, quote, the failure is not with it, but with us, he writes. No, of course. The failure can't be that this was misguided from the beginning. No. The failure is that we got distracted. The gospel-centered movement got distracted. We're right. We were right all along. We're still right. But we got distracted, and that's the failure. Of course, that's the failure. Yeah, it's as simple as that. But of course, Wilson never got distracted. So, he's one of the guys that's steadfast. He's one of the guys that's still, kicking with the truth. You know what I mean? And so everyone else has failed, but Jared Wilson, he's still good. He's still gospel centered. Let's continue. Wilson's reflections and analysis are both. I already read that part. In that single sentence, the entire book turns inward. For Wilson, the movement's collapse is not due to institutional factors or failures. It is spiritual and not doctrinal, not private, not public. The real drift is always within the heart. Of course it is. It's always the morbid introspection. We just didn't focus on the cross enough. We didn't focus on Jesus enough. It's not about what we did. We didn't do anything wrong. It's just that we weren't looking in on the inside to our hearts. We didn't look to the cross enough. How many times have I told you, look to the cross is the answer to everything. Look to the cross. Well, the problem is we stopped doing that. We stopped looking to the cross. We didn't do anything wrong. We just stopped looking to the cross. See, that's the trick, right? That's the trick. He continues, but this is the first error of gospel centrality itself. Exactly. Tyler Cox hits the nail on the head. Exactly. That is the problem. Look, there's nothing wrong with a little introspection. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being a little bit introspective. You got to understand your motivations. You got to understand your desires and all of these things. This is all very important. But we also have to understand that what we do is actually very, very demonstrative of what's going on the inside, and so what we do and the practice and how we engage in things in life, that all matters quite a bit. And so, that is the first error of gospel centrality itself. Let's let Tyler Cox explain, because he seems to get it. I don't know about you, but I think this guy's not kidding, and I think he gets it. Tyler says, by reducing institutional breakdowns to private misalignment, Wilson repeats the theology that insulated the movement from accountability in the first place. When celebrity pastors fell, it was chalked up to personal sin and not the structure of celebrity evangelicalism. When the entire network implodes, the problem was deemed one of, quote, losing the gospel as reality. This is convenient. It absolves the system by individualizing its failures. It fostered what could be called the disembodied ecclesiology, treating spiritual life as a set of private affections rather than embodied worship under ordained oversight. Exactly. He hits the nail on the head. It's always about, look, I know you see what we're doing, you see the institution and the way it's all aligned and the way it seems to be, trying to get cozied up to the liberals and all the right wing is bad, they're naughty, all that stuff. I know you see all that and people don't like that, right? People don't like that. I know you see that Tim Keller will go on CNN and rip all the Christians, and Russell Moore thinks that Christians are all bad because they voted for Donald Trump. I know, I see that. But really, it's all about, because they didn't look to the cross. That's the thing. You're not looking to the cross. That's the problem. It's not the institution doing what the institution wants to do. It's not the institution doing exactly what it's intended to do. It's doing what it's intended to do. No, it's not that. It's that we have to look to the cross, you see. It's all on the inside. It's all about what you love, Russell Moore loves Christ, right? So it doesn't matter what he does politically, obviously. Of course. Tyler continues, Wilson's historical memory is strongest when recounting the events that, according to him, marked the movement's decline. His timeline includes the 2012 Sovereign Grace lawsuits, Driscoll's resignation in 2014, and the end of Together for the Gospel in 2022, and Keller's death in 2023. Yet, when the narrative reaches the political and cultural crises of the past decade, like debates about race in America, Christians and Donald Trump, and COVID, Wilson's posture narrows. He describes the fracturing of evangelical unity, but attributes it to external pressures. Lines were drawn, statements were drafted, suspicions proliferated, he writes, before claiming that detractors wrongly argued that on every test, the gospel-centered movement was determined a failure. His sympathy clearly remains with those who, quote, did their best to navigate uncharted waters, end quote, not with those who saw the sinking ship because the gospel-centered movement's leaders demanded unbiblical, woke approaches to navigating those choppy waters. This is exactly right. Like, I'm sorry, I just cannot muster the sympathy. I cannot muster the sympathy because it's not, this is the thing. He makes it seem like it was this chaotic time, right? This is chaotic time and nobody got it right because it's just chaos and the waters were choppy and it's like, and you can't really blame someone for failing during those times. And I'm here to tell you that that's exactly incorrect. That's exactly wrong. That's where you judge the quality of your leaders during the choppy times. And that's the thing. Anyone can lead a business that's gangbusters. Anyone can do it. When everything you do turns into money, it's easy to be the leader of the business, right? Obviously, anyone could do it. And that's a lot of people think this way, right? Like, oh, I could be the CEO. I could easily be the CEO. And that's not true. That's not true because the CEO makes his money not during the good times necessarily, but during the challenging times, during the rough waters, right? It's like, anyone could be a general of an army at peacetime, but then you can see who the good generals are versus the bad generals when it's wartime, when there's challenges, when there's problems that need to be overcome. That's when you figure out, oh, this guy wasn't wearing any pants and this guy was. You know what I mean? The tide goes out and you find out who's naked. You know what I mean? It's the same thing in the stock market. Everyone makes money in the middle of a bull run. It's easy to do. You set it and forget it. You buy the S&P and the number just keeps going up and to the right. Up and to the right. It just always goes up. Everyone feels like a genius. Every stock they pick is going up. But then when the tide goes out and the economy is struggling, then you see who the professionals were. Then you see who's wearing clothes and who's not. Then you see who's actually just got lucky and who's actually a leader, who's a professional. And that's the thing. He tries to say, well, you can't blame us. It was a tough time. It was a tough time. No. That's when your mettle gets tested. That's when we find out your value. That's when we find out if you really believe the things you say you believe, right? So many people have noticed. It's like, Russell Moore is writing like a patriarchy guy when times are smooth and smooth sailing. And the minute a woman cries, well, then it turns out I'm actually a feminist. Oops, I'm a feminist. This is exactly incorrect. No, this is the exact time when we figure out who's who. And this is the key to all of this. Wilson's right. Well, maybe he's not right. He's arguing against this. But he's right to notice what we say. It's not that they failed 1 out of 10 tests. You know what I mean? You could understand. There's 10 questions on the exam. You miss 1, you miss 2. You're still got a passing grade, baby. You're still doing good. Nobody's expecting perfection, right? Nobody's expecting perfection. You miss 2 out of 10. All right, you still got a passing grade, right? You miss 3 out of 10. It's like, yeah, you really should have done better, man. I had a lot of hope for you, but you know what? You're still all right, man. You're still in that median. You're still in that average, area. You're still okay. You could still be a leader. You're good. But no, you're missing 4 out of 10. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think it's going to get less chaotic in the future. And, we probably need leaders that can handle this. You miss 4 out of 10, you're in solid D territory. I mean, maybe we put you on a performance plan. That's what we'll do. We won't fire you yet, but maybe we'll put you on a performance plan. And you put the work in, you figure out where you went wrong, and then you report back to us. And let us know, where'd you go wrong? Tell us about that. How are you going to fix it for next time? Because next time it's not going to be COVID, it's going to be something else. And so just let us know, what's the framework now, right? You got a D, but there's still hope for you. And you get to missing like 5 out of 10, and you're like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's much. But that's not the thing. It's not even 5 out of 10. These guys were missing 9, 10 out of 10. Every single test, there was a failure. You got no points on the exam. There's no hope. There's no hope. Every single challenge that arose, you were like, I can't meet it. In fact, I'm gonna fight for the other team. I'm gonna go on CNN and fight for the other team. I'm gonna go on CNN and tell them that, all the Christians that don't get the COVID vaccine, well, they're actually breaking the law of God. That's actually a sin. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not only going to fail the test, I'm actually going to change teams on all of these examples. I'm going to do the Black Lives Matter rally. I'm going to cancel church. I'm going to say that you got to get the COVID vaccine, otherwise you're sinning against God. I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm going to join the crazy ladies at the SBC that want to, sue everybody for whatever. I'm going to do all of it. I'm going to join the other team on every one of these issues. That's what happened. That's what happened. But at least they were looking to the cross, right? At least they were looking to the cross. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Tyler Cox is exactly right. His sympathy lies with those who did their best to navigate uncharted waters. Yeah, I'm sure you did your best. See, this is the thing. There's very few people that I actually don't think tried their best, right? There's some people that I know were operatives from the beginning, right? They're just enemies. That's it. But that's the minority, in my opinion. Most of these people were just doing their best, right? But here's the thing, though. Their best wasn't good enough. Their best wasn't close to good enough. Not even close. And that is the exact time to figure out, okay, we got to do something differently here. We got to figure out something differently. And this is the thing. Not everybody failed these tests, right? That's the other thing that guys like Jared C. Wilson need to understand. Like, not everybody failed these tests. Some people got 100%. Not that many, but some did. Some got 10 out of 10. So there is a way forward. It's just not with the gospel-centered movement guys. That's the thing. It's not with those guys. The way forward is not with those guys. That movement's dead. But the thing is, there's plenty of guys that got a great grade. Not everyone got 10 out of 10, but there's a lot of 9 out of 10s, 8 out of 10s, all these things, but they're not the guys that wrote for Crossway. That's the thing. They're not the guys that were at the T4G conference. That's the thing. So no, I mean, I have no sympathy. No sympathy for people who failed the test. Because look, not everybody's cut out for leadership. Not everybody is cut out for it. You might say, I'm not cut out for it. Okay, not a leader. Okay, fine. You can have your opinion. It's totally fine. Not everybody's cut out for it. And the tide went out, and we saw it. We saw it. Just like everybody's not cut out to be a stock expert, a stock trader. The tide goes out, you see who's cut out for it, who's not. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Let's go back to the article. This inward focus produces moral clarity, but practical blindness. 100%. Wilson admits that many found gospel centrality too neutral and thus too neutered to be of any help in the real world of culture wars. He mocks Douglas Wilson's argument that, quote, the gospel, which is at the center, must be at the center of a big circle, not a teeny one, end quote, calling it humorous because others had accused the movement of making the gospel too broad. Yet, this deflection reveals the fundamental inconsistency. Jared Wilson cannot see that his own circle, circumscribed by the pieties, posture, and tone of Big Eva institutions and the therapeutic ethos, was always the smaller one. Very, very insightful, Tyler. Hats off to you. This is a good article. Doug Wilson's, quote, center of everything may overreach, but at least it attempts to reassert the totality of Christ's lordship. The gospel-centered circle shrank until it fit inside the individual conscience. In doing so, the gospel as center became almost exclusively a psychological category of peace, grace, and rest, while ignoring the reality of Christ's reign. This is why it was not only unable to resist cultural pressures, but bowed before them. That's exactly right. And I've heard Jared C. Wilson make this a claim many, many times. He's like, you were saying the gospel's too broad. We were making it too broad. No, it's not exactly that, though, right? It's not exactly that. Because the circle is pretty big, right? The gospel does impact every area of life, right? The problem is not that it was impacting every area of life, Jared. The problem was that it was impacting in your movement. It was impacting every area of life in the opposite way that it should have. That's the problem. It's not that you applied the gospel to reparations. It's that you applied the gospel to reparations in an ungodly way. That's the problem. It was an opposite way. And the way I know that is because the law of God is the law of love, right? So if the gospel is changing hearts to make you a heart of stone to a heart of flesh, and to making you from an enemy of God to a friend of God, then you should be doing things that are in line with what God wants you to do. In fact, that's how you abide in the love of Christ, though. That's the thing. I never learned this in gospel-centered teaching. No. In gospel-centered teaching, the way you abide in the love of Christ is to look to the cross. You just look to the cross. I've heard that 100 times. Look to the cross. And then maybe, you have your quiet time, maybe you read your Bible, maybe you pray. Those are other things that you do to abide in the love of Christ. You just look to the cross, and maybe you fervently pray and think about it. And then that's how you do it. That's how you abide in the love of Christ. But that's actually not what the Bible teaches, though. The Bible actually directly teaches how to abide in the love of Christ, right? That's not what the Bible says, though. I didn't go to seminary, but like in the Bible it says, abide in the love of Christ. How do you do it? Well, you do what he says. you do what he says. That's how you abide. You look to the cross, and then you say, man, God, thank you so much for dying for my sins, Lord Jesus Christ. I'm going to do what you want me to do now. That's as simple as that. I'm going to figure out what you want me to do. I'm going to do that. That's how I'm going to show you that I'm abiding in your love. Pretty simple. So I've heard Jared make this accusation many times. Oh, I thought you were saying it. No, it's not that the gospel shouldn't affect these things. It should. It should. Your changed heart should lead to changed behavior. We all get that in every area of your life. We all understand. But the thing is, though, that you remember the test I was talking about, the 10 questions on the test? Every of one of those 10 areas where you were saying the gospel should apply to this, you were applying it in the wrong way. And it's no wonder, because you never taught on this stuff. You know what I mean? It was all feel-good stuff, right? Because it doesn't feel good to say no reparations, right? So I can't be gospel-centered because it doesn't feel good. It's not nice, right? But the thing is, when I look at the Bible, I see, well, yeah, restitution. The person who's wrong gives the money to the person. So no reparations. That's how the gospel changes my heart to believe what God believes and to teach and promote what God believes, right? It doesn't feel nice. It doesn't feel sentimental, but that's just the truth. Oh, brother. Yeah, so there you go. Contra Doug Wilson. Jared Wilson prefers Ray Ortland's maxim, not his never Trump, this time Harris, always Jesus maxim, but his phrase, quote, gospel doctrine creates a gospel culture, end quote. For Wilson, this appears as an ideal vision, a community of sweetness, grace, and harmony, but that culture in practice became the soft aesthetic of the movement's decline. The doctrine remained, the culture curdled. Exactly. This is the problem, Jared, that your platitudes are totally empty. That's the problem, right? Because this is a nice statement. I could drink a coffee mug that says gospel doctrine creates a gospel culture. I could do that. I could get with that. But the problem is that in practice, your buddies turn that into a Precious Moments figurine. And when I read the Bible, that gospel community doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like the Precious Moments figurine. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. And so when you make it that, then it still sounds nice, but the result is no good. It's the gospel-centered movement's fault. That's the thing. It's your fault. It's not that you didn't look to the cross. It's that you don't even know what it means to look to the cross. That's what it really is. You look to the cross, and all of a sudden, you relentlessly want to do what Jesus says to do. You don't just do whatever feels nice to you, whatever feels loving to you. It's not the famous John Piper quote where the only laws that apply are the loving ones. They're all loving. They all apply. They're all what we should be doing. Article goes on, the Gospel Center Church traded the courage of conviction for tone. That's right. Very much did. It became the pastoral wing of American niceness. The gospel-centered movement emphasized grace at the expense of the application of the word, sacraments, and discipline, hollowing out the very means through which the gospel takes root in communities. Wilson amazingly ignores all these factors. It's not amazing. It's not amazing. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense because Wilson does not believe the way you believe. The application of the word to guys like Wilson only applies to the nice ones. I've heard him talk about this. You're not Jesus. What do you think you're David? What do you think you're Jesus? I've heard him talk about it. It's just only the nice version of it. It's the precious moments version. That's the part that applies, right? Sacraments and discipline. Well, it's only according to the stuff that's approved. That's what it means to him. It's not amazing. This is a part and parcel of the gospel-centered movement. This is what it's all about. He goes on, it is telling that Wilson often quotes John Calvin as an authority for his gospel-centered framework. One wonders whether if Calvin were alive today, or if Wilson were writing in the 16th century Geneva, Calvin would be subject of Wilson's criticism as divisive, or whether he would escape notice because his reforms were too culturally engaged. It's so true. Obviously, Calvin would be excommunicated from the Jared Wilson circle. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's obvious. Obvious. After all, Calvin, who reformed law, worship, and political order, would fall under Wilson's rebuke of those who bring Christianity to bear on culture. If Calvin were alive today, it's hard to imagine he wouldn't be grouped with the Christian nationalists. Wilson now caricatures. The selective appropriation is not incidental. Wilson wants Calvin's gravitas without Calvin's public theology. 100%. 100%. That is exactly correct. Wilson has no difficulty rebuking what he calls the reformed evangelicals who spend the bulk of their time online LARPing as prophets. That's me. He's talking about guys like me. He might even have yours truly in his mind as he says that. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But his criticism, of course, runs only in one direction. He does not address Ray Ortland's promotion of Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. He says nothing about Matt Chandler's race-based hiring methods. He will not confront Tim Keller's use of identity politics. I could list hundreds of examples like this. It's a scam. It's a total scam. Because if you look at the time spent online, LARPing as prophets, if you want to frame it that way, you know what I mean? Jared C. Wilson perfected this long before I even was online at all. That all his time was online. All his time was online. I mean, there's a very good chance that if you total all the time I've been online and the total time he's been online, he's got me beat by a factor of 3x, most likely. That's how it is. I mean, it's just all a scam. The problem is they're losing online, so they want to make it seem like it's bad. Hate the game. Hate the player, not the game. Hate the player, not the game. He does that too. Tyler goes on, these men were central architects of the movement he now eulogizes, but they remain above critique because they represent the tribe. The prophets that Wilson dislikes are only the ones to his right. Moreover, he never seems to make any connection between the decline of gospel-centered movement and the myriad of compromises within his own movement and among his mentors and friends. Maybe, just maybe, those who have rejected the movement weren't disillusioned with the gospel. Perhaps they were disillusioned with the endless lectures on white guilt, the performative repentance for ancestral sins, the soft egalitarianism, the kid glove treatment for the LGBT agenda, and the therapeutic tone that replaced conviction with emotional management, all delivered by the very men who once claimed to recover the glory of grace. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I still love the gospel. I still think about the gospel. I still hear about the gospel. I still talk about the gospel. It's all very important to me. But the thing is, I understand that the whole gospel-centered movement was completely worthless when the time came, when the test came. When the time for testing your mettle came, it was worthless. Not the gospel. The gospel was still good, but the movement was worthless. It was worse than worthless. They all joined the other team. It was actually worse than worthless. At least if it was worthless, I don't have to deal with you. But no, you decided to join the other team against guys like me. Maybe those who see the failures of the gospel-centered movement realize they were being sold an entire bill of soft progressive goods smuggled into the church under a gospel wrapping. It is notable how Wilson and his kind managed to make all of their political preferences a matter of gospel centrality, while right-wing political preferences were labeled gospel distractions. That is the play. It's gospel issue if it's a left-wing issue, if it's a good distraction from the gospel, if it's a right-wing issue. That's the play. That's the basic play. And they'll never deviate from it. It's as simple as that. They will never let it go because that is the heart of it. That's the heart of it. And guys like Jared C. Wilson just don't have enough respect for you to just admit it. To just admit it. Just admit it. On this note, his posture towards political theology is consistent with this inconsistency. Wilson's comments on Black Lives Matter, Trump voters, and racism follow the same young, restless, and reformed moral framing. Sin on the right is pathology. Sin on the left is pastorally complex. The movement's instinct was not silence, but one-sided speech, wrapped in biblical language and directed only at those whose convictions extended beyond therapeutic neutrality. But the deeper problem is theological. Gospel centrality reduced Christology to a private consolation and used it to avoid question. This is a brutal review. This is brutal. What a savage. What an absolute savage. Use it to avoid questions of law, culture, politics, justice, and power. The incarnation, kingdom, and lordship of Christ were flattened into a posture of inward renewal. The heart became the only legitimate terrain of application. In the name of protecting the gospel, the movement evacuated from the public square and institutions, resulting in a form of cultural antinomianism. To quote my friend David Mitzenmacher, the problem is not, quote, too much Christology, but rather too little Christology, and the wrong kind. What the gospel-centered movement has led to is truncated Christology that divorces Christ's person and work from his offices as lawgiver and Lord of nature. In an effort to affirm Christ's centrality, the movement actually removed Christ from the very realms over which he reigns, confining his authority to the conscience but denying it to the polis. Wilson's polemic against harshness fits the same logic. He cites John Piper's advice to Doug Wilson that there should be a more obvious tiers in his work and extends it into the general rebuke of those whose Christianity is too sharp, too public, or too political. Yeah, this is the thing. The only emotion that Jared C. Wilson sees fit when you're engaging the culture is sadness. You gotta have tears. He wrote me a personal email once that mentioned there's no tears in your work. There's no sadness in your work. And while that is very true, there is very little. I mean, I have teared up on the channel before. I have been sad before. And I'm not, going to tell you I'm this big macho guy that's never cried tears of sadness before. I have. But it's just really not a huge part of my personality, I remember telling this story many times. That my grandmother died. My grandmother, who never gave up on me, my grandfather told me that, when I was lost, I was totally lost, complete degenerate. I was just thinking about my degeneracy just the other day. What was it that I was thinking of? It was something brutal, man. Anyway, I forget what it was, but I was total degenerate. I was lost. My grandfather told me that, my grandmother every night, and she would go to bed. She would pray for a couple hours about everything and a lot of her grandchildren. But for whatever reason, she just knew. And I don't think she knew the extent of my degeneracy. I don't think she did. But for whatever reason, that she would pray for me in particular for so much more time than my other cousins and my brother and sister. That she just singled me out for some reason. And maybe it's because I was the first one, and that's why. But maybe she just the Holy Spirit just told her that I'm the one who needed it the most, at that time. And she passed away, and I knew that story and all that. And at this point, I had already become a Christian, and I didn't cry at her funeral. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to tell you I'm a big tough guy. I was very sad. I was very moved by it. I did not cry. It's just some guys are like that. I don't know. I don't have to tell you. I don't have to tell you. So no, I don't cry when I talk about the politics and I'm not sorry that I support ICE. I'm not sorry that I want it to be illegal to be gay in the country. I'm not sorry about it. I'm not sad about it. I know it's going to be tough on you, but I'm not sad about that. I have no sympathy for that. I just don't. deal with it, I guess. I don't know. You need to have the tears. You need the tears. Oh, brother. So he says there should be more tears in his work, and it extends it to the general beak of those whose Christianity is too sharp, too public, or too political. He calls them a subset of those who think sitting in the seat of the scoffers is the place of the blessed. Yet the target is clear. The growing movement of men who found classical Protestantism and ordered community something firmer than what's been called gospel culture. Wilson's chapter on spicy bits and prophetic sarcasm reads as coded dismissal of the post-evangelical right, those of who have outgrown the winsome stage and turned towards the harder claims of Scripture on public life. Jared C. Wilson. I mean, one of the most sarcastic people that I know, definitely spicy when it comes to talking about the right wing. But of course, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to him, of course. It's not for me. It's for you guys. You know, I'm losing here, and I want you to stop. So I want him to seem bad. Jared Wilson, man. This is one of these guys that doesn't own a mirror. He doesn't own a mirror. He can't. You could tell him until you're blue in the face. Look, take a good look in the mirror, Jared. It'll never work because he doesn't own one. Oh, brother. The irony is that Wilson's own narrative confirms their critique. The Gospel Center movement was designed for a stable, neutral world that no longer exists. Its theology of grace was detached from questions of polity and law and nation. When the world pressed back, its adherents could only speak of the heart drift, as he puts it. We are well acquainted, with the danger of the drift. We seem less acquainted with our own susceptibility to it. But the drift was not merely a matter of spiritual susceptibility. It was an ecclesial project that mistook cultural acquiescence for humility and social irrelevance for faithfulness. The book's pastoral tone is genuine. I have no doubt Wilson wants his readers to love Christ. He warns against Christianity as performance art and laments how churches treat sermons as packaged content. He writes that Christianity as performance art is the natural consequence of the gospel being supplanted by the idol of cultural relevance. This is true, but he cannot see that the gospel-centered brand itself was the perfect product of that same thing. The rebranding of historic Protestant doctrine for the attention economy. The conferences, blogs, and podcasts were the form of the movement. Lest We Drift captures the fracturing and fatigue of post-Young, restless, and reformed evangelicalism and the melancholy of men who discovered that sincerity is not structure. Sincerity is not structure. That's very good. Very good. Wilson's prose conveys a sense of healing, yet the book remains a eulogy for an idea that never learned to govern, build, or endure. Gospel centrality as practice could not produce a reformation. It produces groups of people fluid in grace but strangers to order, courage, and conviction. I commend and agree with Wilson's final lesson that we ought to pay closer attention to the gospel, but it is clear that we disagree on what that actually looks like in real life. Wilson's book, for all its pastoral sincerity, remains a salvatory sermon to the self. Yeah, he's preaching the gospel to himself. I mean, I don't doubt Jared's sincerity at all. I think he's a Christian. I think he loves the Lord. I think all these things, but he is incapable. He does not own a mirror. He is incapable of seeing the faults in his own theology, the faults of his own application, the faults of it. And there's no healing it. There's none. You have to admit you were wrong in order to move forward. The tide went out, and you were naked under there, and you just say, well, it was a tough time. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was still right, all that stuff. No. Maybe just put on some clothes. Maybe just change what you were doing, right? Because the next time the tide goes out, there's going to be a next time, you'll be standing there with your swim trunks on, and everything will be fine. I just put on the swim trunks. That's all you got to do. Here's the quote that I was told is most likely about me, and I agree, having heard it. The quote of his book is as follows: "The gospel-centered movement is dead," so commented a former ministry colleague about the present state of an erstwhile grassroots reformation that enjoyed organizational enshrinement, media domination, and church adoption to become the new normal in the evangelical subculture. But its peak seemed to peak too soon. The movement, if needed, that's what it generally was, proved by growing disinterest to not be much more than a fad. For this particular armchair coroner, the primary cause of death was that the influencers and authorities of gospel centrality failed to rise to the occasion of quickly changing cultural challenges and threats to theological orthodoxy. The movement's thought leaders were assimilated into the pacifying and compromising swamps of Big Eva and thus lost their reformational fire and their reformational credibility. I nailed it! That's what I believe. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And he tries to frame it as, oh, poor them, it was a tough time, things were changing quickly. Listen, I know it was a tough time. And that's the thing, I don't blame people for being fooled by the many, many psyops that we had to endure during that time, right? I don't blame people for their mistakes. But I do ask that they pay for them. I do ask that there is some reckoning with them. I do ask that there's some learning from them. Right? There's some learning from them. Man, I got fooled by the George Floyd thing. Man, they fooled me. They fooled me, Jerry. Just some acknowledgement that you got fooled. Okay, a lot of us did. That's okay. I'm not going to hold it against you. So long as you just acknowledge it and say, I learned, and next time it's going to be different. And I'll tell you why, because I learned this and that and this, and I'm going to apply this and that. Maybe I'm just going to wait next time. The next time a black guy gets killed in the street by a cop, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait a few days just to see, because it might be another trick. Might be another trick. No. Can't do that. You got to put the black sticker on your Facebook, obviously. I nailed it. That's just a shorthand way of saying, look, the tide went out, and I saw that a lot of them were naked. Not everyone, but a lot of them were. And then they just went on as if everything was fine. And then a lot of them joined the other team. That's the thing. They joined the other team. Wow, I nailed it, man. I nailed it. If that's about me, which I'm not 100% sure, but that's something I would say. If that's about me, I have to say, I was so right. I was right. I got it. Hope you found this video helpful. God bless.